Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Daniel
with Kurt Bjorklund.
Now we come to the deliverance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is in verse 24 and 25, where it says, Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. And he declared to his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said, O king, true, O king. He answered and said, But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire. They are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like the son of the gods. Here's what one study Bible says about this. It says, The king seemed to only have known the 4th person was a heavenly being. He called him the son of the gods, which is a pagan reference to one who appeared supernatural or an angel. And then this commentator says the 4th person could possibly have been the 2nd person of the Godhead, Jesus Christ, in a pre-incarnate appearance, and cite some of the other Old Testament references to the way that these appearances work. And whether this is Jesus Christ as a pre-incarnate appearance or an angel or God himself, it isn't really the point. We can certainly try to suss that out, and that could be helpful in some ways. But the point is, there is a divine deliverance, and these men were not alone in the fire, and God did supernaturally deliver them. Now, the challenge for you, for me, is sometimes people of faith, when they are put in a place where they have somebody against them and they have crossed the powers that be, are not miraculously delivered. And so you might say, well, this story isn't that helpful because that's a great story and I see it. But I think what's important here to understand ultimately is that God does deliver his people. And it may not be in the way that we think or in the time that we think it should be. Here he waited until they were already in the fire and now he shows up with them. And he is in it with them and delivers them through the fire. And what other people have intended here for harm, he takes and he rescues the men. And so God ultimately rescues his people, even if from every human appearance, all hope has been lost. Now, I don't know, obviously, those who might be listening today to these few minutes, where your temptation is to compromise with culture. And you may look at it and say, well, if I do, it's not going to be that big a deal. And it's not clear if God's going to deliver me or not. But the idea in this passage is that the divine doesn't really show up in our midst until we surrender and abandon our own efforts entirely. That is when we see God's hand at work. And sometimes the reason we don't see God's hand is we don't put ourselves in a place where it's the only pathway forward. What we do instead is we keep trying to manipulate and finagle and figure out how to make something work. Instead of saying simply, I will trust that God is at work and God will work in this, even if it doesn't make perfect sense to me. The whole point here of, but if not faith, in many ways, this whole chapter, if you want to summarize it this way, is to be able to say, I don't need God to act in a certain way. I will do the right thing regardless of what he does. But the assurance here is that God will show up and give us what we ultimately need, even if it isn't what we think we need. And so today, will you, again, just continue to trust God and count on the fact that there will be his presence with you in the deepest, darkest trial of your life if you are willing to trust him.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.